It's the dead of night. Your party begins to descend the carved stone staircase of the dragon's lair, in search of the rumored hoard of treasures and magical items that the colossal beast is hoarding. You come across the pile of riches, various gold pieces, precious stones, a chest with unknown contents. This is enough treasure to make you the richest person in the region. No, the continent. Your bewilderment of these riches is interrupted by a sound of loud, heavy breathing. This is the ancient red dragon that is sitting on its pile of hoard, sleeping away, just as you planned. You decide that you're going to use this opportunity to fill your pockets with as much treasure as you can hold. You begin to go towards the lone chest that you see. As you go towards the iron latch, you're surprised as it feels wet and sticky. You try to retract your hand from the chest, but you can't. It's stuck. And a pair of eyes split open the top of the chest. The chest opens to reveal a large purple tongue and even larger teeth as it clamps down on your arm. You scream in pain, momentarily forgetting where you are. You panic, as the mimic is the least of your problems. You turn to the dragon asleep. You turn to the sleeping dragon. It is no longer sleeping, as you see large eyes trained on your position, ready to attack. Welcome to the Sourcebook on RiotRadio.ca. My name is Evan Halbert, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're back, as we would say. I haven't done a Sourcebook episode for 4 years, about that. So it's been a while. We're very excited to be back. In the past, I've done shows that were talking about Dungeons and Dragons, the characters, the races, how to build a character, things like that. Today, we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're talking about monsters, the different monsters that you may encounter in your Dungeons and Dragons adventures. And today, we're doing a monster that is weirdly close to my heart. It's the Mimic. Our Mimic is exactly that, a giant chest with multiple beating eyes, a large tongue, and very sharp teeth. There's a story that goes along with why this is one of my favorite monsters and why this is so special to me. And as in my tour of Dungeons and Dragons games, this has been the monster that's been the bane of my existence. One of the first campaigns I ever played in, I was playing a paladin. We were searching a dungeon very similar to the scenario that I gave at the top of the show. Go figure, I reach for a chest. It clamps onto my arm, and suddenly I'm stuck. I wish that was the end of the story. Unfortunately, after we defeated this Mimic, I decided I would try a door, only to find out that was also a Mimic, and there was now another one attached to my arm. Not fun at all. If you're unfamiliar or if you're new to Dungeons and Dragons, this is a very common thing. It's a lot of fun. If you enjoy the idea of roleplay, if you enjoy tabletop gaming, it's a great time and it's really enjoyable. And you can have some really fun stories and fun scenarios that happen, even in this case, where you get trapped by a Mimic. Not fun. Okay, so a little bit of background. Today we're going to be talking about the Mimic and what's happening and what it does. So the Mimic are shape changers, not to be confused with shape shifters. Shape shifters change into other animals, other people. Those would be like your changelings. Those would be like your werewolves, things like that. Shape changers specifically change into inanimate objects. Now, in most media surrounded by D&D and various other things, the Mimic is usually portrayed as a chest of some sorts. It's meant to lure in its targets so that, you're going to have a snack, just enjoy the meal. Nom nom. But it doesn't have to be a chest. It can be kind of whatever you want it to be. So if you're a DM and you're creating a game and you want to utilize mimics, you can make them whatever you want. You can make them a door. You can make them a book, various other things that you could be. The entire point of it is that mimics are meant to be some kind of like prized or often utilized item so that it can trap its foes and, eat them. Very scary, very not so great monsters. in terms, but very fun to use as a dungeon master. It's very enjoyable when your party just happens upon one of these creatures. Now, I described it earlier that they have an adhesive ability. So it's not just you can touch one of these creatures and suddenly you're like, oh no, that's bad, let's pull away. No, it actually is, you're stuck to the creature, and there's nothing you can really do. Now, mimics are often portrayed as being lone solitary creatures, but in recent advancements of the different books that we have available to us, we have talked about mimic colonies. So our mimic colonies in this terrifying image is a variety of different things. I think almost everything in this image is a mimic of some sort. So you can see the chairs, you can see the hanging vines or the hanging potter plants. You can see one in the bottom corner. But also if you look at the overtop roof, there's teeth up there. The entire house is a mimic ready to nom on these poor unsuspecting people. Even their teacups are mimics, and that's terrifying. So this was introduced into Tasha's. We'll talk a little bit more about that, or I'll show you what that looks like briefly. But they come together to form larger objects, and the way that this happens is mimics will bond and form together. Now, I think one of the common misconceptions when we're talking about mimics is they don't have any form of thought and they don't really think, and that's really not true. They're kind of like Venus flytraps in a sense that they go based off feel, but they're also sentient and they can think and they can even speak in some situations. So mimic colonies, they can speak to each other. So, you know, your potted plant can talk to your chair and be like, yo, this guy looks tasty, nom nom, we're just going to get him. And that's something that was not really talked about when the first book really came out, that they had these telekinetic abilities. If the colony is large enough and there's enough of them around, some mimics get so strong that they can actually communicate with the party and communicate with characters. So you could be walking into a town and suddenly you hear a voice, and it could be someone tricking you. It could be, hey, help me. I need you to come help. Or, you know, something along those lines, and suddenly your party is walking into, you know, a mimic house, and that's bad. That's how you TPK or total party kill. There's so many scary things that could happen. So if you're ever encountering a situation where your party or your DM might be like, hey, there was a town that just appeared out of nowhere, or there was something brand new, or even just a cave that just suddenly appeared. There's something that you can always think about is the idea of, ooh, this cave might be a mimic. Ooh, this entire town might be mimics. Now, one of the things I read while I was doing research for this show is that mimics are, they hide themselves not because they're not very strong, realistically. They are usually just more of a hindrance if you are a higher party level, and if more thing, they're just more fun for the DM to use and to throw at you. But realistically, they're not overly strong. And there are situations where if a colony deems that whoever their target is or whoever walks in is too strong for them, they'll negotiate and be like, look, I'll give you information if you want to, you know, not kill me and all that good stuff. So that's another tactic that you can use. If you say you planted this idea of a colony early on in your campaign, your party has gone off and they've done other things, and then they come back, it doesn't make sense for it to grow in strength. So you can have it negotiate and say, hey, I'll give you gold, I'll give you information, just don't come back here, let us live. And then it gives more agency to your players so they can decide what it is they want to do. They can either be like, no, you are clearly a mimic, I understand what you are now, and you're going to just allow people to walk in, and you're just going to start feeding on people. No. Or you could be like, yeah, 100%, I'll be back later. Maybe not really, but yeah, you can keep doing your thing. Okay, so for all you DMs out there, we're going to pull up the stat blocks for all the mimics. So on the left-hand side, we have our mimic, and we have a juvenile mimic. The key difference is the challenge rating. The challenge rating is listed underneath, and this is what you use to mark how strong the party needs to be. So if you're new to DMing and you don't really understand what a challenge rating means, you take the number. So for our mimic, it's challenge 2. that number 2 is an average of 4 party members being level 2 for this to be a challenging fight. So if you look at the juvenile mimic, it's got a challenge of 0. It's not really that scary. You'd probably throw a bunch of these at a party and it still wouldn't really be a problem for them. Or this would be a good beginning or starting adventure. So we can see we have some shape changing for our mimic. Our juvenile mimic doesn't actually have that. It does indicate that it has an object form, but it's not really listed in there, which is kind of silly. It's actually under the actions, which is a little different. They also have pseudopods, which is a bludgeoning weapon or a bludgeoning attack that they can use against each other. And a lot of the mimic's functions are focused on the ability to kind of hide itself and lie in wait. Kind of that same Venus flytrap mentality to go with it. One of the things I wasn't expecting is our juvenile mimic has spider climb, which spider climb allows it to move up walls and ceilings at will without needing to make any additional ability checks. If you're unfamiliar with how those rules work, then I can cover an episode just on like the basic understanding of some rules. But just know that juvenile mimics can hang from the ceiling, no problem, and they will drop on you. Very scary. Okay, so where did I get all this information from? I've been using the Monster Manual, as well as Tasha's Cauldron for Everything. Yeah, Tasha's Cauldron for every single thing. Trust me, it's got everything. It's not quite the correct title. That's a meme title, but I still thought it was funny, so we included it. It's also homebrew. It's got a little bit more in there. So the title picture is the same. It's just not exactly that. The Monster Manual, these are like one of the 3 books that you should get if you're starting a new game. The other 2 being the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook. The Monster Manual has all the different monsters, and I'm going to be referencing from that in future episodes as much as I can. So there's all sorts of cool stuff that will be in there. So you can pick up these 2 books, or you can go to Any Flip if you're a little strapped for cash. Most of these books are about $70 at your local bookstore. But you can also go online. There's tons of PDFs out there if you just want to have them as a quick reference. That helps as well. Okay, and that's it. That's all we're talking about today. We're done. Mimics they're one of my favorite creatures, and I find that even regardless of what fantasy setting I'm playing, I always seem to be the one who discovers them first. If you are also the person who always seems to be falling for these creatures, let us know how that seems to be going for you, and if you enjoy it or if you don't enjoy it. If these are the bane of your existence, you can do that by following us on social media at DCSA Media Hub. And that's all for today. Thanks for joining in. We'll see you next week, where we'll be talking about a different form of monster. In the future, we might classify different monsters together. So I might do an episode entirely on dragons or entirely on giants, just because there's a bunch of them. And doing them individually doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But stay tuned. We'll be in next week to do that. Thanks for watching. This has been the Sourcebook on riotradio.ca.